last night and today is my mom's Yahrzeit, which is, we follow the lunar, so it's 3 years since her passing. And I wanted to sort of talk about her a little bit and about what inspired the Light of the Infinite, this whole project. When she passed away, I devoted 2 years of my life to writing these sefarim, so this is the first one. I'm going to read from it a little bit about my mom, and then I'll go into some Torah, some rebbenachman Torah that I think is applicable for right now, and just talk about how she inspired me, how I hope to inspire other people, how I went from a space of my whole family being fearful to speak at her funeral. We all have this massive stage fright, and just how trying to elevate her soul, I'm continuously trying to break through this stage fright. And of course, thinking back, I was like, man, I wish I would have been able to say something different or just speak from the heart. But at that time, it was just to get through the little piece of paper and the little thing that I wrote was so difficult. So the truth is, what I wanted to do at the funeral was just play this one Bon Iver song, and literally that's it. I felt like it captured it. I was listening to it on the way to the funeral, to her kever, and I don't know. Sometimes music is just, when there are no words, that's what music is for, and that's kind of what I felt like that I should have been doing. But I think, at the same time, being able to speak and elevate people and share some Torah is also super powerful. So we got to do a little bit of that. So now we're back in the energies and in cyclical time in this space that, that she passed away in this space like 3 years ago. So I'm going to read from the book I wrote about her here. You can see her photo. This I just shared on Instagram. This is an illustration from my friend Elke of my mom from her china, the Yemenite wedding. And I'll just read. The intro of my book has some different things that I wrote around her passing. And this is my kid's Bobby, so my ex-wife's mom. And the first time I wrote any of these chapters was in a way for her soul elevation. It was a year after her passing. She passed away on Purim. So that was the first time. And thanks for everybody who's commenting. I love you guys and I appreciate it. So that was the first time I wrote, this sort of a Dvar Torah, this sort of like inspiring thing, bringing in ancient Jewish mysticism and hopefully inspiring other people. And when people connected with that, I decided I would sort of continue. And unfortunately, when my mom passed, that was when I decided I would do the full cycle. So there's the 5 books of the Torah, and we read it every single year. So this is book number 1. This is the Genesis of Light. The next book we'll be reading is the Exodus of Darkness. I've named them all off, kind of like playing off the titles of the 5 books of the Torah. So anyway, I'm going to jump in now. So this is about Savta, which my kids call her, which means grandmother. So this I wrote October 27th, 2020. All that we crave and need is love and support in its many manifestations. My mom always gave me that. Every song I made, every poem I wrote, every show I played, she and my Savta and my entire Yemenite family were the inspiration for both Shemspeed, this label that I started back in the day and toured the world with: Berlin, Jerusalem, Kiev, London, Melbourne, Moscow, Paris, Sydney, Tel Aviv, Yalta, and literally all over the States. And the big inspiration behind my Sephardic music festival, using Sephardic as an umbrella term for Jews indigenous to the Middle East. And, a lot of Ashkenazi Jews, like when we were exiled and when we were in Europe, that they get a lot of attention, but the truth is Israel is made up of mostly Mizrahi, so Jews from the Middle East, and my wanting to highlight Yemenite Jews especially, but also Jews from all these other Middle East countries. I started this Sephardic music festival, and it ran for 12 years, 10 in New York, and I would literally get phone calls from Wall Street Journal and New York Times, like, what are you doing this year? Because I would do it over Hanukkah, and they ran like 2-page spreads, photos, a whole thing on it. And then I did 2 years in LA where I had Asaf Avidan, Yemen Blues, a bunch of other epic artists. In New York, I work with everybody from Hadag Nachash, of course, Matisyahu, Idan Reichel, and just epic people. And the compilations, you can go to Spotify and listen to them. There's 2 full CDs, and they're incredible. I mean, these are artists from around the world. It's called Sephardic Music Festival, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Volume 1 starts with a song by Matisyahu with a Yemenite chorus who Yehuda sings from the Moshav band. He also does Abba Shimon. There's another song from the Diwan, and it's incredible. We have everybody from the legendary Yasmin Levy to Yair Dalal, and then a ton of new artists. Balkan Beatbox remix of Sarah Aroeste singing Ladino. It's really powerful. So check that out. You could DM me if you need a direct link or any more info. So, as I mentioned, the New York Times and Wall Street Journal would cover it, and tens of thousands of people would come to this festival celebrating the diversity of the Jewish people. And it was also not just live shows or parties, it was also symposiums, educational components, family events. 1 second, sorry. All your allergies. That's my Ashkenazi side, I think. There's probably going to be another one coming out, but let's see. So we would jump into the history of the Jews from indigenous to the Middle East, and hopefully they also saw how much shared culture and history we have with all the people in that area. So much of division and hate is based on lack of knowledge and history and a focus on the other. My purpose in putting these festivals on year after year was to highlight not the otherness, but the oneness. My mom would come up every year for opening or closing night of the festival and get to see sold-out crowds enjoying the sort of music she had me growing up listening to. The 2 compilations I put out, which you can hear on Spotify, which we talked about, has Watcher Clan, a bunch of different Ladino artists, Tamir of Balkan Beatbox remixes, and so many other incredible artists, all the sorts of music my mom and I would love so much. I was on a flight on the way back east again to see her, scared I would not arrive in time. I called my friend Idan Reichel to sing and let her know that I was on my way. He did just that, and it showed how much love there was around her. I really just want to thank all of the hundreds of musicians that believed in all these projects, because the truth is, it was all born of a dream my mom had. Love y'all. So I'm going to read a poem that I wrote 2 weeks before she passed. I couldn't read it to her because it was sort of telling of this impending demise, I guess, of her in the physical space, and it just didn't feel appropriate at the time. But when I was able to get back again to her and sit by her side, as I mentioned, Idan did a video because my sister was like, she shouldn't still be here, like she hasn't been communicative for all this time, and obviously she can't drink or eat or whatever. She was pretty much like almost fully gone, and she said she's just waiting for me to be there, and then her soul is going to depart. And Idan did a video. It was incredible. He's such an angel. And he said, my mom's name's Frida Livona Bat Shalom. And he said, Frida, Erez is on his way. And then he started to play Mi Mama Kim on piano, and I got to play her that. Her brother, my uncle, played it to her before I got there and said that she squeezed his hand, and it was the only sign of life really in the last however many days. And she waited for me to get there. I spent the night near her bed, and read her this poem that I'm going to read to you. And also, Zusha Shlomo, my friend, also did a video as well and sang a song, basically just improv, and I played that for her. And, of course, said Tehillim and all that. And, yeah, it was just really difficult. But I did read her this poem at that point, so I'll read it now. A love untainted, I expected nothing. Given everything, nursed into existence, I followed you around the world. Every bit of art inspired by your family. exiled for thousands of years, eyes on the Holy Land, showed me about your love in my little hand. I'm crying as I realize soon I can't reach out, at least not in this world. But the bits you left, I'll pick them up till there's nothing left. Put it in my art, set it free. Now it's you and me, and the person who sees, feels, knows that it's real. So that was there. My sister printed that out when we were doing the Shiva, the 7 days of mourning, and people were reading it. I don't know, my sister just, I guess it hit her and she got it. But I didn't read it to my mom, I think, until hours before she passed. I'm going to read one other. This is just an entry that I was writing, I think after she passed, and it says a little bit about her. So this is in the intro of The Genesis of Light, a book I wrote for her soul elevation. And I'll read this little bit. I felt moved to share something more about my mom since this project is in her memory. My mom taught Talmud to women, made sculptures, painted, and played accordion. I mean, she was an incredible force. I see her in my kids, and I'm thankful for that. Her parents moved to Israel around 1927. She grew up making art and music. She was the oldest and played mother to her younger siblings. In her 20s, my mom worked with special needs kids, doing art therapy. Her medium was sculpture and illustration. After meeting my dad in Israel, she moved to America and became an au pair in Chicago, where he lived. They got married and moved to New York, where she then received her bachelor's degree in Talmud at JTS, which was so interesting because once they got a divorce, she told me, she was like, by the way, I'm not religious. And, she kept a kosher home for us. But, she basically kind of was like, I made a deal that, I'll raise you guys religious. But now that we're divorced and you're older, she kind of let me know. But she always had love for it, both, as I mentioned, she's teaching Talmud and just intellectually and spiritually and definitely culturally. So it still instilled a massive, there was an impact and inspiration through seeing that and through her family, her mom, her savta, my savta, her mom, as I mentioned, is Yemenite. She actually was born and raised in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. And none of my cousins on my mom or dad's side are religious. So when I was living in Israel and studying yeshiva, I would come to my savtas in Tel Aviv on Shabbat. And I remember when I would be singing with my friends on Shabbat, singing these songs, she was on the couch crying. And I feel like, I don't know exactly what was going through her head, but in some ways, traditionally, historically, all of the songs that we sing every day, and especially on Shabbat, both are in Hebrew, so our tradition as Jews from Israel, but also center around this idea of returning to Zion. And we're in Israel, but returning in all the glory where Hashem is revealed and no longer concealed, and the third temple is there. So I feel like for her, she's sitting on this couch. She's, was living in Ethiopia and Yemen and coming to Israel. And it's in her lifetime, she realized the return to our promised land in her lifetime, which is wild to think. Thousands of years yearning to be back in the promised land. And of course, at different times being in the promised land. But to the extent that we're there, how we are now, and as difficult as it may be, it's still mind-blowing. And her sitting on the couch listening to, one of her grandchildren actually singing these songs, connecting to it, and us sitting in her living room in Ramat Gan, outside of Tel Aviv, it's just wild. And last time, I remember she would always tell me these stories of Mordechai Sharabi, this Mikubal, this Yemenite Mikubal, this tzaddik. And at the time, I didn't really believe them because I was like, okay, whatever, just not really believing that these miracles could happen. And last time I was in Israel, just 2 weeks ago, I went to Mordechai Sharabi's yeshiva. It's called Yeshivat Mekubalim, but also Nar Shalom. And I thought I was going to be hearing a class. This was on Sukkot, so I thought I was going to be hearing a class from Rav Eliyahu Atiyah, who I'm going to be reading from his version of, he did this whole thing for Sipurei Masiot, but also Likutei Maharan, and he expounds on it. It's incredible. I'll read Lamed Gimel pretty soon. Love you guys too. And so I went there. I thought I was going to be hearing him, but it was actually another big Kabbalist of Beneahu Shmueli, and it was incredible. The sukkah was wild. It was massive. So many people and so much color. Like, it was so wild how they set it up and decorated it. And from the ceiling, like all over, from the schach, from the roof of the sukkah, was at this point, I think it was probably arak bottles and wine bottles just like all over. It was so wild. But anyway, he was just giving this class, and it was amazing. And I was thinking, I wish I had connected and really believed really connected to these stories that my Savta was telling me about Mordechai Sharabi, because now it's like, okay, I believe all of them, like, and I wish I knew them, and I wish I could hear them, but she's passed, and the stories, unless my aunt, who I needed to talk to about it, Sigali, knows them, they've kind of passed with her. So I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things. It's like you never really remember to record or film these stories from your grandparents while they're happening. But now that we all have like these crazy phones that could do anything, we should remember to capture those moments, because once they're gone, Oh yeah, I think I stopped in the middle because I was talking about, my mom, who was learning at JTS. She was there at the time of Avram Joshua Heschel, who's just a giant, and who I always connected with his writing because it was so poetic. My dad said he used to spend like so many hours on each line, and you can see it. It's so dense. It's like reading, a philosophical, spiritual version of a Dostoevsky book, just like incredible. So he was a huge influence on me, and my mom and dad were there at the same time as him, and it must have been amazing. So then they moved to Miami shortly after, and she became a rebbitzin, a term that she really did not like, because my dad was the Hillel director at the University of Miami, as he was also a chaplain in the Navy. And we moved around every 2 to 3 years. And after that, they had moved to California. I was born in San Diego. A month later, we moved to Japan. So I was basically like a month shy of being Japanese, I feel like. And then they moved to South Carolina, Italy, Chicago, and then they basically retired, or he retired in Maryland. So that's where my dad still is. My mom is up above, listening hopefully, and getting some chizuk, some strength from this. So she took courses at local universities and accumulated enough credits to sit for a CPA exam. You have to keep in mind that she only spoke Hebrew, so she was doing all this while learning English, which she excelled at very quickly. And she went on to rise to the top of her profession. At that time when she took the CPA exam, even though she had only started learning English in her mid-20s, she succeeded in passing all 4 parts of the CPA exam on her first try, which is a rarity. She joined various firms and then eventually became a named partner in a public accounting firm in Bethesda, Maryland. It's rare for anyone to have such a strong hold on both the right and left side of their brain, but my mom was not just anyone. As everyone who came by to console us in our time of mourning said, what made her so unique was that she was such a strong woman, but at the same time had such a soft and loving side to her, making all that came into contact with her feel warm. I learned almost everything from my mother by just seeing how she navigated and loved the journey of it all. We connected on so many things, but one of the most special was going to concerts together. 2 in particular stood out. One was Buena Vista Social Club, and we saw them in DC, and I think they're from Havana. This incredible guitarist and producer, Ry Cooter, took the time to basically put all these musicians together and to record all of this music so it wouldn't disappear, because they were way older at this time. And Ibrahim Ferrer, who's one of the singers, my mom and I got to see him as well, solo. I remember he signed the CD and everything, and he passed away shortly after. but that was something we always connected on. And I remember those concerts as just, when you love music to that extent and you're with somebody, especially your mom, who connects on that extent, it's indescribable, that feeling. The other concert that we went to was very special because my favorite artist in the world is John Coltrane. He's incredible. I think he's the only artist to have a church after him, basically. But I could hear one note from his saxophone, literally one note, and I know it's him, which is just insane to think. You hear one note from a saxophone, but that's how powerful he was. And he basically reached this like Zen state. He was playing 10 to 12 hours a day, and he reached a space, beyond the 10,000 hours that Malcolm Gladwell talked about in his book. He's just, I don't even know how to describe it, but we got to see McCoy Tyner, who was in his famous quartet, and he was the pianist, and he was playing on A Love Supreme, and we got to see McCoy playing at the, I think it was Blues Alley in Georgetown, and that was mind-blowing. And I actually got him, I wish it was the vinyl, but I got him to sign the CD, which I still need to frame. I could frame it with vinyl, I guess. But that was another concert I got to go see with my mom, and probably one of the most important shows that I got to attend. So, yeah, and this is just sort of an entry that I wrote after she passed, and I was talking about that he signed my favorite album, which he was such a big part of, with John Coltrane, and it was called A Love Supreme. And I've ended this entry writing A Love Supreme Indeed. So I'm going to read another poem, and then maybe we'll jump into some rebbenachman Likutei Moharan, and then finish it off. Let's see if I can find this. So if you do want to jump in further into, what came out of this for her soul elevation, like I said, this is the first of the book series, Light of the Infinite. This one's called The Genesis of Light. You can see it says number 1 there. And if you know Obey Giant, everybody wears the Obey, and he did he was famous before this, but he did the Peace and Hope Obama posters and everything. His art is like iconic. So he describes the book really well, his review of the book, so I'll just read it here so you get a sense. While our culture often exacerbates feelings of inadequacy, stress, competition, and isolation, Erezsafar's Light of the Infinite offers a welcome illumination of philosophies and practices that calm inner turmoil and cultivate positivity. We are all seeking joy and harmony inside and outside ourselves. This book provides valuable tools to advance that quest. So that's Shepherd Fairy Obey Giant. And I did it. This was also actually on her last Yahrzeit, just exactly 1 year ago in the lunar cycle. I get a text from Deepak Chopra, who I was like praying would not only read the book, but actually connect with it. So that obviously happened, but he took it a step further by actually reaching out to me and asking me to do a show with him around Kabbalah and around the book series. This was for my second book, The Exodus of Darkness. And after he was asking me about the Kabbalah, I don't remember exactly what the question was, but I was kind of trying to describe that we see throughout all these stories in the Torah that all of these things are happening within us at all times. So when we're thinking about Meitzar, constriction, which is Mitzrayim, which is Egypt, represented by Egypt and Pharaoh, and when we think about Israel and the Promised Land, we're always trying to leave these constrictions, these fears, these anxieties, trying to reach our own Promised Land. And the same with Yaakov, Jacob, and Esav, that they're also representative of each side that we have, like the nefesh elokit, the godly soul, the good inclination, and the nefesh habehemit, the animal soul, and the bad inclination. And that, it's written in the Gur Aryeh that even in the embryonic stage, this is even seen. So it's not something developed later. It was actually, this is representative of it, and they're the embodiment of these polarities. And we see that because their mom, when she was walking, near a place of holiness, that Yaakov would kick and try to get out. And when it was the opposite, the other side, which is called the Sitra Achra, then Esav would try to jump out. And when I was describing this, Deepak, this is why Deepak Chopra is Deepak Chopra, because at the end of me going on about this, trying to explain it for 20 minutes, he just says, I mean, I added the beginning, but he wrote that my book series is not just being a spiritual book of historic tales, the Torah, but this is illustrating the stories that outline the archetypal states of consciousness within our own selves. And I'm like, wow, that's such an incredible review of this book, and also of what the Torah is when you go deeper into the sod, into the secret, into the chassidut of it. So I'm going to read this other poem. My friend asked me to speak and do this short story event. And I'm not, I'm still fighting through public speaking, but I didn't really have any story. And I was on a flight on the way back from New York. This was going to be like the next night, I think. So on the flight, I wrote this, and I shared it the next day. I woke up one day, and she was dead. My mom, gone, just like that. All these thoughts racing through my head. The one person whose love to me was unconditional. Things fall apart, but I wasn't ready for that to start. I built it up so tall, never stopped to think of the fall. Down, down, down. What pieces were left? What piece am I left? Did I transform this sadness into something else? Or did I just sweep it away for another day, a month, a year? Time is a figment of a fractured world, and mine was just that. If words create these worlds of ours, I fixed mine through them. I dreamt mine to them. I found her again. And now I see her through every response these words receive. It felt like a reprieve, but now feels like a way to receive her through the mirrors that we all are. Angels don't die, they multiply. I was never good at math, but I could see the infinite in the love this love sent. Part 2. A mirror. Was it broken? I couldn't see clear. It was clouded, abstracted with fear. I rode that wave, a smooth, familiar feeling, like a fiending for easy. Stunted growth, a rest stop on the exhausting path toward elevation. The price? Ephemeral dopamine hits, but never elation. Fear fosters comfort in a weird way, but it was time to feel all the real, all the divine decrees to a freer me. I would channel it, stepping it into a self-appointed role, one to inspire us all to release this obsessive control. Learning all the ancient Jewish mystics and kaballah so you won't have to, spreading it on toast so that it might satiate even the furthest ones the most. A return to what truly is, not the layers fueled by fear, but the transparent, the space that truth went, concealed in plain sight by being the only thing real in this stage fight. Part 3. My little gloves in this ring. It felt silly, but also felt like a beginning, the first thought of thoughts of winning. How to write a book. I've always wanted to, but that was 20 years ago. Shouldn't these dreams slow? What will I write? I want to inspire the fire that love grows. I want to rewire the mind that doubt closed. Wow, these words are waves and fallen. Wow, these words are waves and water. A well for the fallen. I stood upright, showing them the light that darkness brings, the melody of alchemy. This mirror wasn't so bad. I could only see the present, and even that seemed abstract. So I looked past it, ignoring the reflection, allowing the refraction. I found her there. I stopped and stared. She, in every being, it was me I was seeing. We are only light.